Hi, this is Dan, and these are my top 10 releases in gaming for 2016. These are in no particular order, and a couple of them are downloadable content expansions that came out this year for games that actually were released last year. First up, we have Fallout 4 Nuka World. This is the only downloadable expansion I've gotten for the game, and the reason I got it was because this summer, for some dumb reason, I really wanted to go to a theme park. Eventually I did get out to one, but for a short time Nuka World tided me over. More recently though, continuing the whimsical adventure through the post-apocalyptic wonderland has gotten me back into a game that had completely lost my interest due to its abandonment of the strong RPG character building systems of previous titles in the series. Basically, Fallout 3 was one of my favorite games of all time. In that game, you were able very early to max out certain stats, such as sneak and lockpick. And that lent itself to some really fun, different builds. You could also max out your explosives. Fallout 4 changed a few things, and basically, they gated things off, like maxing out your sneak or your lockpick. They gated it out with level progression. So by the time you're able to maximize your sneak or anything else, you're already a really powerful character who can do a lot of things. It struck me as fairly generic. However, the world design, look, and feel of Nuka World kind of helped me to ignore that, and I was enjoying traveling around and going on safaris like I did in Fallout 3 again. So that's why Nuka World for Fallout 4 is on my top releases of 2016. Stardew Valley. This is a game I was avoiding for fear of being sucked in. Eventually, a friend bought it for me, so I tried it. And luckily it didn't suck me in too much. I played a lot of Animal Crossing on the GameCube back in the day, and this game feels very similar, but better. Also, it has a couple of kind of fun dungeons to fight in while mining resources. Interactions with other villagers include friendships, dating, marriage, parenthood. There's a lot of options to decide how you're gonna make your living. You can focus on growing crops, taking care of animals, fishing. Long story short, there are a lot of things to do and see and experience in Stardew Valley. It's one of my favorite games of 2016. My Summer Car. This is a weird one. It's a very glitchy game built in the Unity engine, but that's part of its charm. Games like Goat Simulator from a few years back featured glitches. Glitches were featured, and while I really didn't like Goat Simulator, this game has a certain quality to it, a certain grist. Basically, you have to build a car from scratch, and every part you have to find and adjust just right in order for it to work. It's easy to die, and the game only allows you one save. So essentially, it's a permadeath game. The controls are weird, the humor is crude, and sometimes it's not clear what exactly you're supposed to do. This is early video of me playing, and I didn't get very far in the video. Eventually you find a store and you buy things, and there's very little instructions. This may be a game best enjoyed with a guide, or perhaps not, and you just want to wander around this surreal version of Finland, pissing and drinking and driving and often dying. So essentially the gameplay is really not what you enjoy or what you're meant to enjoy in My Summer Car. It's more of a story creation engine, and that's why it's one of my favorite games of 2016. Rust. Rust has been in development for some years now, but I'm including it on this list because it seems to have come into its own this year. The online multiplayer survival simulator's best feature seems to be the sheer volume of people playing it. Teaming up and building bases over the game's persistent server cycles is time-consuming, but rewarding when you find a few allies to then go out and make other players' lives harder. This was another game that was bought for me, so that's why I tried it. And in the first part of the video, I woke up on a server I'd been playing on with a friend inside of a base, and I couldn't get out because he had changed the lock, so I had to start on a fresh server or different server with a fresh character, and I ended up running around a bit. There were several people on the server, but I didn't run into anyone, and eventually I got killed by a wolf. So Rust, definitely one of the more enjoyable online experiences I've had in 2016. Magic Duels, Shadows over Innistrad, and Eldritch Moon. Magic Duels is a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. The base game was released over a year ago, but this year's Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon expansion sets have really upped my experience building decks to take online and do battle with. I especially like the Wolf and Werewolf cards, whose synergy can become overwhelming quite quickly. In this video, I'm playing with a black and white deck, mostly built around the rally effect in cards, and there's also some pretty powerful angel cards in the deck as well. I did end up winning this match here. It was a close one. Many of the cards in this deck are from both the Eldritch Moon and Shadows over Innistrad sets, and that's why Magic Duels 2016, these expansions have made it one of my favorite games of 2016. Dungeon Rats. Iron Tower Studio is a small niche developer who is making some of the most interesting strategic RPGs being developed today. Their previous title, Age of Decadence, while including battle mechanics, seemed to steer you away from it. While I was playing that previous game, I got the feeling that Iron Tower were perhaps unconfident in the fighting mechanics because they thought they may be a bit crude by today's standards. While they are a bit crude, they were actually one of my favorite parts of the game. I really enjoyed the fights. They're distinctly old school with refinements in different ways compared to modern throwbacks like Wasteland 2 and Pillars of Eternity. Apparently, some other players felt the same way, because this year's Dungeon Rats is nothing but carefully scripted fights. And unlike the Age of Decadence, you can control a whole party of 4. While the basic engine and brutal difficulty will not attract everybody, fans of old-school party-based RPGs would be missing out on a piquant, no-nonsense approach to this classic genre. Clockwork Empires. This game was in early access for 2 years, and was still released as a bit of a glitchy mess, but I'm compelled by its charm. It's a slow-developing building game, and tries to bring Dwarf Fortress-like mechanics to a wider audience. It won't be for everybody. However, the art, writing, and music makes the experience very nice. The developer, Gaslamp Games, who is well regarded for the roguelike Dungeons of Dreadmore, have iterated their attempt at making an archaic game type approachable. While Dungeons of Dreadmore is sublime in this effort, Clockwork Empires is ambitious, but falls short. I'm glad they did it, though, and look forward to finding more time to play this game. I also really want to see what Gaslamp does next. Attack on Titan, Wings of Freedom. For me, this one came out of nowhere. It is an action-packed manga fest, where you play as a team of spider people who kill, or subjugate as it said, giant naked baby people by cutting off their limbs and severing their spines. It's fucking bonkers. I really enjoyed the story too, which is doled out in chapters between missions. The controls are tight, and rarely frustrating. It feels like how every Spider-Man game should feel, but doesn't. And the brutality of it, it feels pretty appropriate. And that's why Attack on Titan, Wings of Freedom, is one of my favorite games of 2016. Divinity Original Sin 2. Currently, this is just an early access demo, but the density and multiplayer are amazing. This is the best demo I've ever played. I'm very excited for the full game. There is so much you can do, and playing with a friend online is joyful. I really enjoyed Divinity Original Sin Part 1, but this one does things that I never expected from a old school style RPG. I wanted to include some video from later into the game, but the save games that I had were not working because of a recent patch. So, unless you're willing to go along with the development process, this will not be one that you should pick up until it's finished, probably next year. But if things like that don't bother you, I highly recommend playing this game today, if possible. So Divinity Original Sin Part 2 is one of my favorite games of 2016. Dark Souls 3. Far from my favorite game in the series, Dark Souls 3 really fell flat for me, and I have a hard time getting my interest up to play it. That being said, it is pretty great, and my disappointment stems from experience with previous titles in the series. The multiplayer in Dark Souls 3 is wild. It's nuts when 5 or 6 players are running around a huge area doing battle, and it is a pretty great technical feat. Currently, I'm waiting for my interest to rekindle, which I think will happen after all the DLC comes out. That's when I look forward to battling through the rest of this great, but for me, underwhelming game.